Why is it that the audience that you looked at, the predominant audience, is this white baby boomer crowd?
Well, I think part of it is what I said, but it's also, of course, with the British invasion in the 60s, they were made aware of this powerful, powerful music in a new way. It became relevant to them. There's an interesting study that shows that when we show pictures to babies of dolls, or we have dolls and we show them to babies of benevolent actions, all babies will be drawn towards the benevolent versus the unpleasant dolls. But when the unpleasant doll is of a different color or has a different language, the babies will be drawn to the one that looks like them, whether it is benevolent or has a threatening behavior. So there is something inbred in us that when somebody looks like us, we pay attention in a different way. And that's a wiring that we can set ourselves beyond with awareness raising and learning how to do that. But in our sort of inbred structure is this tendency to look to those that look like us. So when whites started to play the blues, all of a sudden it had a voice and a immediacy and a relevance to the white population that it didn't before, that when it was all around, certainly here in America it was all around, but whites didn't really pay attention. And then when it came in with the white performers, all of a sudden it was like, wow, there's this powerful music and it makes me feel something that I didn't even know that I felt. And then starts what I call the treasure hunt. That discovery then leads to, oh my gosh, it comes from this, and listen to this music. And we get even closer to the base of the power of this music through this treasure hunt back in time, where it's now the black performers and the understanding of where this music comes from. Something happened in the 60s where this music really got to have a very powerful voice among the white community, and blacks moved on largely to a lot of other genres and blues-inspired music. And I think there are evidence that some in the African-American community are re-embracing this music without maybe the pain that was attached to it before, because it was tied in with an understanding of and some really difficult memories of the suffering that the black people had experienced in American culture. So I think for some African Americans, the evidence that I unearthed, it looks as if this was just difficult music to deal with, and they didn't need the indirect language of signifying anymore. They were allowed their voice after the civil rights movement. They had a much more powerful way maybe to communicate what they needed at that time. And where maybe the white community came in and really needed the emotional transparency and the being allowed to state emotions matter-of-factly, whether they're happy or sad. And there was a method and a role model in the blues to do that. In our core, we are the same. We're absolutely, if you take a skeleton of a Muslim and a skeleton of a Christian, it looks the same. And so in our core, we are one and the same. And this music is so designed, really, to bring that awareness about. And I think it is one of the gifts from this African American tradition that came into our culture that really helped us remember that. It helped us connect to that. Where it is now, it offers us an opportunity to visit with that inbred tendency to want to listen to those that look like us, whether we are black or white, because if we are aware that we're wired that way, we can also tell ourselves, hey, wait a minute, that's just how I'm evolutionarily wired, but where we are now in this time, we don't have to be like this. We can listen to each other and learn from each other, because the blues is a product of a merging of cultures. And that is precisely where the power comes in, when we can merge traditions and merge influences and merge inspiration from those who are not like us. There's a tremendous power and growth in that. The human voice and the wailing qualities you have both in harmonica and in guitar sometimes can also communicate beyond words that experience of together experiencing that it's not always easy, and we can move through it and be released.
And Doug MacLeod has said, and others have said it different ways, that blues is not a music of subjugation, it's a music of overcoming. And what role does suffering play in our like of blues? Is it a release of that suffering, or can someone who has no suffering at all that they can detect still have that endorphin rush?
Well, there's some interesting studies that show that it is if you take human cultures across the board, all over the world, vocalizations of pain and suffering are easily translatable and understood in all cultures, whether it's in Africa or it's in Iceland or wherever it is. When we express vocally our pain, that is something that translates. However, when we express joy or elation or triumph, whatever the quote-unquote positive emotions would be, they don't translate universally. So there's something in us as human beings that is resonating very powerfully with each other's vocalizations of suffering. And there's a connection and a feel of compassion and unity that comes from, oh, others feel that way too. It's not just me. And when we're not alone with our suffering, we are in a community of human beings, not of some of the distinctions that we normally put up, like black or white or left or right or American or not. We are human beings that united recognize something basic in one another, and that's very powerful. As Joe Louis Walker said in his interview with me, he said, it disarms the baggage, and I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. The blues has a way of disarming whatever it is we are going through, whatever it is that we think is separating us and making us just resonate with one another. And this is not the story that the media tells us. This is not the story that our political leaders sometimes tells us. It's certainly not the story our religions tell us. But it's the story of the blues.